Welcome, everyone, to the land of my grandmothers. I am Komema Kalapuya. We are the southernmost Kalapuya people. Kalapuyas were once the largest Western Oregon Indian tribe, once 15,000 people in the Willamette Valley and the Upper Umpqua Valley. 15,000 people who did not have a word for preservation, did not have a word for ecology or environment, because our word for those was respect. And respect was the one thing that was most important. Respect for the earth, respect for yourself, respect for the elders. This is something that was very important to us, was respect. Here in Oregon, the native people, especially my people, the Kalapuya, had a wonderful abundance. That abundance made our people thrive. That abundance was wonderful. And we saw it change very quickly. It changed so quickly that many of my ancestors were surprised and struck by the difference of opinions, the difference of views. We call it two-way seeing, a way that the newcomers saw the land and a way that our people saw the land. You see, we believe that a long time ago, the world was made of stone. And there were stone mountains and stone valleys, and at the very top of the tallest stone mountain, something came to life. And that life became known as Tlilu, first woman, who walked down from that mountain, and she had two babies clutched to her breast. And as she walked, whenever she took a step, the grass began to grow. And when she had stopped to rest and touch the ground, the grass began to grow, the waters began to flow. And she walked with those two babies until she came to the bottom of that stone mountain, to the large, flat stone valley. And there she met Quartux, Mother Wolf, who looked at her and said, "Who are you?" She said, "I am Tlilu, first woman." Quartux, Mother Wolf, said, "Where did the babies come from?" And Tlilu said, "I dreamed of them and they came to me. But I'm going around to look around in the world, to find food for my babies, to find a place to sleep, and I'm looking for someone to watch these babies while I do this, because the journey will be so long." And Quartux, Mother Wolf, looked at Tlilu and smiled, and her teeth flashed in the sun. And Mother Wolf said, "I will watch them." Tlilu was a bit afraid, but something inside of her heart made her trust Quartux. And so she wove a very large pack basket, put the babies inside the pack basket, and tied it to the back of Mother Wolf, Quartux. And to make sure that the babies were safe, that they wouldn't fall from the basket, Tlilu wove a wide strap and bound the babies inside the basket, and she went away to look around in the world. And she was gone a long time, many, many days, many nights. When she returned, she couldn't find Quartux. Quartux and the babies were gone. And she walked around for many days looking for Quartux, looking for her babies. She was crying and wailing inside that she should not have trusted Mother Wolf. She walked until she came to a large, large stone mountain. And there, in a small cave where the grass was starting to grow, there was Quartux, smiling her smile with those babies in that basket on her back. Tlilu was so overjoyed. She ran up to Quartux, unstrapped those babies, took them out of the basket, hugged them to her breast, and she noticed that something was different. She looked at those babies. She had strapped them so tightly in the basket that their forehead was flattened. And Tlilu said, "This is good. From now on, we will flatten the foreheads of babies in honor of Cortex, Mother Wolf." And indeed, that's what our people did. To honor the wolf, we flattened the foreheads of the babies. Because if you've ever noticed the profile of a wolf, you'll see that the head is flattened. And this is why we flatten the foreheads of babies. Cortex was very important to us. We never killed Cortex. Only certain people could even possess the skins. This is a wolf that was killed about 85 years ago, and it was gifted to me by a good friend. You see, Cortex was so important to us that when the newcomers came, we tried to express this, that this was our sacred animal. But they wouldn't listen. You see, the newcomers came with those stories of Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, Peter and the Wolf, the Three Little Pigs, and the Big Bad Wolf. Assumptions that wolves were bad. And so they began killing wolves, thinking that they were going to sneak into their farms and gobble up their children and their livestock. Well, the wolves did like sheep. That's true. But I'm sure they didn't acquire a taste for children. But soon the wolves were gone. One account of a trading post on the Umpqua River says, "Today we collected so many skins of those scandalous wolves that they piled up as high as a man's shoulder, and they stank, and we had to push them in the river." And so the wolves were gone, the sacred animal of the Kalapuya. The two ways of seeing. We didn't protect the wolf particularly because of preservation. We protected the wolf because of respect. And this respect came into many parts of our life. The respect for the land particularly. Our people, the Kalapuya, and many, many other nations all across America, called themselves the people, or the people of the land. Our traditional village was called Shlach Da'ala, which meant people of the valley. Komema, the people. Because our people who lived there, we believed that we had a responsibility. The responsibilities was not preservation. It was respect for what's there. Because through centuries and thousands of years, we realized that what we took can be replaced if we're very, very careful. The same reason that people used to gift the land when something was taken, the camas, or the berries, or the birds, or any kind of game, were gifted after they were taken. This was respect. Now, if the newcomers had respect, I don't know. I think it was a different kind of respect. It was not a respect necessarily for the land. It was maybe a respect for themselves to survive. This is the two ways of seeing. Sometimes these two ways of seeing can be good, but often it was not good. Our people in Yoncalla believed that rattlesnake was a very, very important part of our beginnings, And in fact, some of the rock carvings in our area have pictures of rattlesnakes. Kunswonik, we call him. He was one of the first animals on Earth. We revered the rattlesnake. And a long time ago, about 150 years ago, the pioneer Applegate family came into our valley and established a very good relationship with my people. They were respectful to us. We became friends. In fact, my great-great-grandfather, Kamafima, became very, very good friends with Charlie Applegate, one of the first Applegates to come into Oregon. They were walking up through the woods one day, and there was a rattlesnake across the path. Well, Charlie Applegate was so afraid of rattlesnakes, he took out his gun and he was going to shoot that rattlesnake. My great-great-grandfather Kamafima said no. He said, "You stay over there." Kamafima went up to that rattlesnake and picked it up and put it around his shoulders and stroked it until it went to sleep. Charlie Applegate made a big, wide path around that rattlesnake, and my great-great-grandfather took that rattlesnake off, set it on the ground, and it laid there for a long, long time and finally went away. Charlie Applegate in his journal said, "That old man sure knew how to handle snakes. And he took me out of a bad situation. I respect him for that." And so instead of getting rid of something that we're afraid of, we do something to make it okay. The two ways of seeing is that the newcomers decided that what was different and what was new was not something that you can work with, that it had to be changed. Instead of living with the land, the idea was to conquer the land. And conquering the land always has bad consequences. Two ways of seeing happened a lot in the history of our people, in the history of Oregon. Our people, of course, burned the valley for a lot of reasons. The wild sunflower, tarweed, salawa, whatever you want to call it, was in the valley. It was very, very dense with wild sunflowers. After the valley was burned, our people would go along and collect the seeds for food, but also extract oil, which some of us still do now, from these burnt seeds. And we would rub this oil on our bodies. Some of the first explorers and frontiersmen who came down the Columbia River asked the people on the Columbia, "Who are those people who live in that valley?" And the Columbia River people said, "Oh, Kalachpuya," as if it was a terrible thing. Kalachpuya in their language means rubbed on. And they thought it was maybe perhaps a bit savage for us to take sunflower oil and rub it on our bodies, which we still do in ceremony. Kalachpuya, Kalapuya. We think that's maybe how people call us by that name. We were never known by Kalapuya. We were known by our individual names. We are the Komema. But the burning of the valley, I've read a lot of books about the burnings, a lot of accounts, a lot of very scientific discussions about the burnings. Some of the first newcomers who came to the valley were sure that somebody lit a match down in the Roseburg area and the fire just flew all the way to the Columbia River, out of control. Our people, where I come from, in Yoncalla, the Komema people, each family group had responsibility for a certain area. All of the fires were usually started at about the same time and tended by certain family members. The women would signal the time when the fires would start, and then the men would normally tend these fires. Now, of course, when the pioneers came, that freaked them out. The fires were going to burn down their houses and their towns and the fences and everything else and just get out of control. So it soon became against the law to burn the valley. There's a really great journal entry by one of the Applegates who said, when we came to this valley, the grass was as high as the sides of a horse. And when we'd ride our horses up into the hills, the wild strawberries were so thick that they would turn our horses' hooves the color of blood. And now it's no more. We stopped our friends from putting fire to the earth. And today we had a plague of grasshoppers. Grasshoppers so thick that they got into Alicia's hair. That was one of the children. And there was a black cloud that came from the west and covered our house and covered our land. And it was grasshoppers. And this was something that happened within 2 years after the native people, my people, stopped burning the land. Consequences. That's what happens, is consequences. These consequences are really quite evident all across America. We can see it in what happened with the Dust Bowl. We can see it in what happened with all of these places that people are trying so desperately to save. People who really have good hearts. All of you who are interested in preservation. To bring back perhaps what was once here. To bring back these things out of respect. Preservation to us now simply means trying to bring back some of those aspects of the life that was here before the newcomers came. Preservation means making a canoe. 4 years ago, our people, we made a 23-foot Kalapuya long canoe, the first one ever to be constructed in over 150 years. To us, that's bringing back a part of who we were. Preservation means working on learning the language again. You see, the Kalapuya language is a sleeping language. It's not a dead language because it can come back. We want to try to work on that. The languages were so decimated that no one speaks that language, but we do have songs and ceremonies and words in that language, and we're trying to bring it back. We do have some songs. We're teaching those songs to our children. We do have some dances. We're teaching those things to our children. The preservation to us now is something that is extremely important, because with this preservation, we don't necessarily feel more Kalapuya, but we simply feel that as a Kalapuya we have a richer life. Now, these things that are gone are not things that we place blame for. It's really counterproductive to say that the newcomers did all this and we're really very angry about it. It's disappointing, and it does anger us inside, but it's counterproductive to be pointing fingers and placing blame on what happened. We can only cheer those people who are trying to bring those things back. Preservation and our connection to the land happens with us every day. Every day that we see our kids dancing, and every day that we hear our children singing a song, that's preservation. And our connection to the land is very, very strong and very, very deep. We still have stories of our people. And those stories are so important to us because it brings us back to that time, the time before, when animals taught us lessons. That time before, when we could look at something as simple as a story, and it reminds us about moral behavior. It reminds us about how to respect the earth. In our stories, there are so many references to preservation, so many references to how to take care of things, how to treat your children, how to treat your elders, and how to treat the earth. These stories are so important to us. It gives us the opportunity to teach not only our children but other people, to teach them how to act, to teach them what is right and what is wrong. Stories are very, very important. We have in the Kalapuya culture many stories, of course, that involve Coyote. And Coyote among our people is, he's a figure that you kind of learn what to do by watching what he does, because he always makes mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. Those are the kinds of things. One of our stories, for example, talks about the time that Coyote, wanting to be warm when he was in a snowstorm, went inside of a hollow tree and sealed up the hole. And when he wanted to get out again, he couldn't remember the words to open up that hole. And he had to take himself apart to get out of that tree because there was only a small hole. And because he is what he is, he of course didn't think that he did anything wrong. Everyone he talked to, he placed the blame on someone else. And so we teach our children about taking responsibility. Responsibility for your actions. Responsibility for thinking ahead. Stories like stories about Butterfly Girl who never paid attention to anything and always got in some kind of trouble. Stories about Flint Boy, who went to avenge the death of his grandfather because the bear killed his grandfather. But in the way that he went about it, we teach our children, don't ravage things that are in front of you. Flint Boy, when he went on his journey for revenge against the bear, met many, many different creatures that perhaps were not of the highest morals or the most honest, and he could have easily taken his stone knife and killed them. But in the conversations in the story, what he did was he overcame what they stood for in a good way and then continued on his journey. Those are the things that our children learn from our stories about how to overcome certain things without eradicating what is in front of you. Those are the very important things that we have in our culture. Now, before I came to this conference, last year I believe was the first year, I'd never really thought about preservation as such. I never thought about how Native people would save the planet. But in thinking about that, I believe that the way that we are contributing to this is perhaps sending our messages. Sending our messages that perhaps there is an alternative way. Perhaps the way that our ancestors helped to preserve the land without really knowing it, preserving it out of respect. And I think that respect is the one word that is so important in our culture. If we can respect everything from the smallest to the largest, I think we will succeed. And in terms of respect, respect would mean that you would do your very, very best to make sure that that one thing never disappears from the earth. Make sure that those people never, ever disappear from the earth. and to do what you can to make sure that those ideals are upheld. That's what preservation means to me. In all aspects of what we are looking at, things that are endangered, things that perhaps we think we don't need, let's get rid of them. But to look at it in terms of respect and thinking about what you can do.